Hola, buenas tardes. Good afternoon. This is Abelardo de la Peña Jr., Director of Marketing and Communications with La Plaza de Cultura y Artes, welcoming you to today's edition of En Casa con la Plaza. It's Monday afternoon, 3 o'clock here, Pacific Daylight Time. I hope you all sprung forward and changed your clocks, and thank you for all being here. So 3 o'clock Mondays, En Casa con la Plaza Cocina, where we bring to you the best of our cuisine from Mexico, Mexican American, Southern California. And today to present our guest, I'm going to bring on Jimena Martin. But before I do that, please, if you're on Zoom, use the chat. Let us know where you're viewing from. Use the Q&A. Ask questions, please. We'll get to them during and after the presentation. Facebook as well. Please use the comment section. Let us know where you're viewing from. And also ask questions and make comments, shout outs. So right now, Braden Coleman with love from Maui. So welcome, aloha. So with that, turning it over to Jimena Martin, our Director of Programming and Culinary Arts, and I'll be leaving you, and we'll see you in a little while. All right, welcome.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Abelardo. What a nice afternoon to spend with Ms. Maite Gomez-Rejon. How many of these have we done so far for this past year?
I think this is the fourth or fifth? Fourth? I can't remember. We've done a few.
Okay. Sure. A little introduction for those who are first-time visitors with us here at La Plaza and Cocina. For over a decade, Maite Gomez-Rejon explores art and culinary history through lectures, cooking classes, and tastings at museums across the country, through essays and articles on culinary history, and also in various publications. Maite is an educator, writer, cook, and has worked in education departments at the Met, at MoMA, at LACMA, and at the Getty. She's a native of Southern Texas and earned her BFA at UTA, MFA at the Art Institute of Chicago, and the Grand Diplôme from the French Institute in New York. She has worked in restaurant kitchens in France and in Mexico before combining her two passions of art and food and founding ArtBites in 2007. She lives in Los Angeles with her husband and with her rescue dog. Today we'll be making Calabacitas in Rancho, and she will discuss Mexico's first female cookbook authors.
Thank
Hola.
you. Hi, thank you. Thank you, Jimena. And thank you all so much for joining us today. It's always a pleasure to work with La Plaza. And I'm very excited about this topic, exploring Mexico's first female cookbook author, especially with it being Women's History Month. So I thought this would be a great thing to do. So what I'll do for the next, 45 minutes or so, I will share stories about this cookbook, which I do not own. I've been trying to get my hands on it for forever, but I haven't been able to find it at a price that I could afford, at least. And it's a book by a woman named Vicenta Torres de Rubio. I'm actually going to share the link to it because it is digitalized. So if anybody is interested, I'm going to put it here in the chat if anybody's interested in looking at this cookbook. So I'll just share a few stories about this book. If anybody has any questions, please ask. And then I'm going to prepare, as Jimena said, a recipe from its pages, Calabacitas de mi Rancho, which translates to squash from my ranch, which is basically squash that's cooked in a green sauce, a salsa verde, and chicharrones, the fried pork skin. And her recipe also has pork ribs. I'm not doing the ribs, I'm just doing the pork skin, just for time. And that's what we'll do. So if anybody has any questions, please ask. So I'll start with this book. So Vicenta Torres de Rubio was a woman. She had a popular newspaper column. The book is called Cocina Michoacana, which means the Michoacan kitchen, Michoacan being a state in central Mexico. So she had a popular column in the newspaper there, and through this newspaper, she began reaching out to other newspapers around the country, soliciting recipes. Now, this is 1896. So at this time, it's just a little over a decade before the Mexican Revolution, which started in 1910. So this is a period in Mexican history known as the Porfirian regime. There was the president / dictator, Porfirio Diaz. He was a Francophile, and his whole thinking, even though he was from Oaxaca, he was of mixed race, mestizo from Oaxaca, his whole thinking was that corn, the native corn, which is the life force of the country, suppressed the pre-Columbian population. And salvation was in European history and European foods. So this was the thinking in the time, during the time, for decades in Mexico. This is sort of the thinking. Actually, between 1876 and 1910, he was in power. So just to give you a sense, there were a lot of cookbooks being written at this time, but they were very European. The focus was very European. You do see tamales and, certain recipes appear in these cookbooks that are, traditionally Mexican, lots of moles. Traditionally, what we think of traditionally Mexican foods are in these cookbooks, but it was very much, the food was what you ate was divided between classes. So at this time in the cities, particularly Mexico City, there were a lot of specialty shops that sold imported wines and pâtés, and a lot of French cookbooks were being published. A man named Brillat Savarin, who was a French cookbook author, he had his book. It's a very famous book called The Physiology of Taste. It was published in Mexico in the 1850s before it was published in Spain. So this is how, Mexico sort of loved everything Spanish. There was quite a big cookbook population, or cookbook, not population, but a lot of cookbooks were being published, but they were all published by men. They were all written by men. And women, of course, were the ones that were in the home, and the women were the ones that were really creating Mexican food and creating Mexican cooking, but they were just recording them in manuscripts for use at home, maybe to share with their, daughters, with their, families, with, just sort of share with friends. But we don't really see, and the most famous one of these manuscripts is the one by Sor Juana, the nun, Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz, in the 17th century. These were the first real recipes that we have evidence of, but always manuscripts. And sometimes they would be printed, not published on a mass scale, but printed just to as charitable cookbooks, just to sort of raise funds for a particular cause. And most of these were done through Catholic charities. So this was not uncommon, but the recipes, they were small. Your neighbor might have one, your family would have one. And it wasn't until Vicenta Torres de Rubio that said, you know what, I'm going to enter this field. I'm going to publish a cookbook, which she did in 1896. But her book was not just the first cookbook published by a woman in Mexico, it was also the first regional cookbook. And Mexico is a large country, and what they're eating in the Yucatan Peninsula is very different than what they're eating in Monterrey in northern Mexico, and very different what they're eating in Baja. So people didn't know what other people were eating. Everything was very compartmentalized. So through her popular newspaper column, she began soliciting recipes. And women, housewives from, Morelia to wherever, Tijuana to Mérida, started sending her recipes. And they all begin with, "Dear Vicenta, I send you a humble gift of my recipe for Calabacitas de mi rancho, the little squash from my ranch, or my recipe for cochinita pibil, or for whatever it was." So she started getting recipes from all over the country, she compiled all these recipes, interspersed with her own recipes, or about 800 recipes in this cookbook, and she published them, and it became a huge best-selling cookbook. Now, that in and of itself is really interesting, but this was just in the years before the Mexican Revolution. So there was already this movement of thinking of Mexican history in the country itself and not in European roots. In previous recipes, the tortillas that were published were the egg and potato, the Spanish egg and potato dishes. So she just thinks, the regular housewife at home isn't cooking in the European style. We're cooking what we're growing and what's available in the market. So she really attacks this irreverent, cookbooks and irrelevant recipes that are being published in other books, because nobody's really cooking that way. So that's like a jab to the Porfirian regime through food, just by saying this. But at the same time, it's been 300 years since the conquest of Mexico. So European foods, French, Italian, Spanish foods are very much a part of the culture, of the culinary culture. So there are recipes for béarnaise sauce and bechamel sauce right next to recipes for chile chipotle sauce and chile ancho sauce. So they're very comfortable next to each other. But it's the first time that we actually see that. She has recipes for pozole. She has recipes for very traditional Mexican foods. Again, interspersed with very European runs. Chayotes in pipián, which is the chayote. It's almost like between a squash and a potato, kind of. It's native to Mexico, in a pumpkin seed sauce. And the recipe that's right after that is foie gras with aspic. So it's all kind of mixed together. She has recipes for meats, for fish, for poultry, and then there's an entire recipe, an entire section on the metric system. So she really explains the importance of sort of the metric system. She says, what does she say here? That the section is necessary because the government has ordered the metric system be used instead of the ancient one that the Spaniards taught us. So she has this whole section. And then, of course, in a nod to these household management books, European household management books, there's a whole recipe on medicine, homemade medicine, from everything like how to get really shiny hair, how to cure, corns in your feet, how to have soft skin, perfumery, all sorts of beauty tips. So everything is all just kind of mixed together. It's really, really, and it's just a really fascinating book. I'm not really seeing the chat, but does anybody have any questions before I continue?
No, hasta ahora a lot of saludos from Elsa Herrera from Wilmington, California. Mexica Garcia, Ahu, she said hello. So a lot of saludes, but tell us more about the book and like how much is that her cookbook going for?
How much?
Yeah.
How much did it sell then, or how much?
Well, if we wanted to buy that book now, because I started to collect books myself, so I'm always like, the price tag. But how much is that going for?
It's been out of print forever, and I did find a copy online once. It was $3,000. So it's expensive, and every time I go to Mexico City particularly, I go to the bookstores and I look like crazy, and I have found some gems, but never hers. And the link that I shared is in Spanish. It has not been translated. It's one of these books that just kind of went into, oblivion, but she really opened the doors. And what she did was so interesting, that she used this book by including béarnaise sauce next to chile chipotle sauce. She really blurred class and social lines by putting these together. This is how people were cooking, everywhere. And she opened up this new market of woman making a book for women, and really empowered a lot of women to be able to do this, and opened up a lot of business opportunities for other women. And after the revolution, which you kind of see, hints of it, the way that she writes the book, the recipes that she includes, which is not something that we think about in cookbooks today, but it was quite political. I mean, food is political, but the way that she does it as a woman in that time period was incredibly, groundbreaking. And by the time we get 1910s and 1920s, we see a huge market of women publishing cookbooks. They're kind of using food as a way to, assert themselves. And then we move to the 1930s and 40s, this woman named Vicenta Torres de Rubio, and we've talked about her before, Jimena. If anybody has been in my previous classes, I've mentioned her. She had a whole culinary empire in Mexico. She traveled the country collecting recipes as well. And rather than publishing, which she did eventually, a book with regional recipes, she published lots of little books that became bestsellers. And she wrote this book that I've, again, mentioned before, Mexican Cookbook Devoted to American Homes. This is the first regional Mexican cookbook published in the US. And so she followed Vicenta Torres de Rubio's lead of, the previous, this is from the 1940s. So, 40 plus years later, this woman is sort of following her lead.
I listen to your conversations all the time, and you talk about these books, and I started collecting cookbooks myself. And so I went online, started digging in Mexican websites and book sites, but I was able to find the Sor Juana book that you offered. I couldn't get a copy. However, it is digital, and you can actually download her book for free for the Sor Juana book. So just a little FYI. And then we have some other folks saying hello. Pamela Cooley says hello from Cape Cod. And then let's see, Susan Hamer, also from Los Angeles. Alejandra Espansande. Saludos desde Hawthorne. And some suggestions too. We do some of our classes in Spanish, just to let everybody know. So a lot of people were asking if we could do a conversation like this with this book so that la tias, la moms, la abuelas can sit in and listen to it. We will be doing Spanish program, just give and take, but absolutely in the future.
I would love that. Yeah, definitely.
Excellent. So something to think about for the future. But thank you, Ms. Adriana Moreno Nevas, for that suggestion. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, especially, I find it, so inspiring that a woman like this could just say, you know what, to be the first person to write, a regional cookbook, that it wasn't that long ago, 1890s, that people knew what people in other parts of the country were cooking, that it really, and by doing this, she really not only blurred these class, social lines, but she really created a national community through, and that's what food does, right? It creates community. She was really the first person to do this in Mexico on a national scale.
Do you think if we bought one, we could split it, Maite?
We should, yeah. I'll keep looking. It's a good thing, like you say, so many of these books are now digitalized. So we're lucky. I was lucky enough to see it, to look through it. LA Public Library has a copy, and it's so beautiful. The illustrations, these like lithographs, they're just stunning. These these fish that are hanging, and definitely look through that link. And even if you don't speak, Spanish, just scroll through it so you could see the illustrations. And I believe the link is black and white, but they're pink in the book. They're pink, and they're like a pale green and a pale blue. It's like these pastel colors. They're really, really stunning. I mean, they did not make it cheaply. She went all out to produce a really beautiful cookbook.
So we have a little bit before we go, a little saludos de Goyo de la Sierra. And I'll say, can you resend the link? Okay, we'll do that internally.
Okay.
But please.
Yeah, the link I sent, I put it at the very beginning of the chat. That's up there. So, and it's called Cocina Michoacana, which just means Michoacan kitchen, which is funny because it's not just about Michoacan, it's from all over that she decided to create this book. So any other questions, or should we start cooking?
Let's start cooking.
Let's start cooking. Okay. So there are so many different recipes, And I couldn't decide. It took me forever to figure out, okay, what to make. And she even has like sorbets made with, jasmine, like rose petals. Like she has really rustic dishes, and then also really just elegant, dishes and, ices and jams and marmalades, using just all of these, native foods and non-native foods. So just really kind of exotic flavors. But I decided to go just old school, the Rancho, and make these chicharrón and salsa verde. Basically, it's just these fried pork skin in the green sauce. And I remember, it's so funny, these food memories. My parents threw a party for my cousin who was getting married when I was 12 years old. My parents always used to throw the best parties. And my mom made this huge pot of chicharrón and salsa verde. And I don't know if it's the first time I tasted it, but I just remember that. And I haven't eaten them in years. And even yesterday I bought the chicharrones, and in the car I was like, oh my God, this is so good. This is so delicious. So it's basically, sometimes they're called pork cracklings in English. In Spanish, it's just chicharrón. It's basically the pork rind that's fried. So it's this whole idea of course, using every part of the animal. And it's often eaten as a snack, just with a little lime and a little chile, or cooked in salsa, and usually either green sauce or red sauce, and just eaten in a tortilla. Sometimes it has a little bit of cheese on it, but just eaten in a tortilla. So you can buy this. The freshest ones are if you go to a Mexican market and they have them on the counter. You can also buy them, they have them in a little bag, like where they have potato chips. But you just have to be careful if you want to make this recipe, because those are usually already have condiments in them. So they already have chile, they already have lemon, or whatever. So if you want to make this recipe, just make sure that they don't have anything on them. If you're lucky enough to live near a Mexican market, go there and get them, and that's going to be the freshest that you can find. And also sometimes they just make them out of flour. So just look at the ingredients if you buy them in the bag, that it's not just flour.
You know what I like when we go to the Mexican market and you buy the fresh chicharrones? They're this big. There's huge pieces, and then to get the crackle going on.
I know. There were some, well, actually the ones that come in, I called first. There's a Oaxacan market, actually not too far from here, called Mayordomia. And I called to see if they had them before I head over. And the ones that come in the big sheets, they were out of those. She's like, if you come now, okay, but I'm not going to save any for you. We just have the botaneros, which were already broken up. They didn't have very much left. I probably went around 2 o'clock and they were almost, done. There was one that's a little bit big, but everything else is already cut into the little pieces. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to make a green sauce, the salsa verde, using the tomatillos. So basically it has the tomatillos. I'm using 1 pound of them, and I already peeled and cleaned them just for time's sake. But if anybody's not familiar, they kind of come wrapped in this little husk. So I just remove the husk and rinse them because they're just kind of sticky. So I'm gonna start making this while I'm talking. So I have 1 pound of them, and this is the green tomato. Tomatoes are native to Mexico. Actually, the word tomate comes from tomatl, which is Nahuatl for something round and plump. So these are called tomatillos, and also, like, my mom calls them fresadilla, which calls a little strawberry tomato. Sometimes they're called mil tomate. In certain parts of Mexico, this is just tomate. It's just a tomato, and the red tomato is the jitomate. So, but they're a little tart. It's not like the red tomato to eat it raw. I actually have eaten it raw, but it's just really kind of tart. So I'm gonna add 1 pound of tomatoes, and then 1 chile serrano. This is actually quite big, so I'm just going to use 1. And this is something that, if you like it, if they're regular size, this is kind of about the size of 2 of them. So I'm just going to add the chile serrano, so another ingredient native to Mexico. And that's spicy, I can smell it. I'm just going to add 1 clove of garlic, and I'm gonna boil all of this or simmer all of this. You see how the tomatoes are so bright, bright green? They'll turn gray. They'll turn kind of a sad gray color. And then, so it's just tomato, the chile, garlic, and a small onion. So usually the recipe that I sent over calls for half an onion. I'm using the whole onion because this is like the smallest onion I've ever seen. So I'm just peeling it, and then I'm just bringing it to simmer until everything is nice and soft. And while I do that, I'm going to start cooking the calabacita part of the recipe. Does anybody have any questions?
How long do you let it simmer for?
Just about 10 minutes. It doesn't take that long. It's just until the tomatoes they turn gray, and we just want everything really nice and soft. Yeah, just really nice and soft. Anything else? Yeah, this is such a great salsa. And what I'm gonna do to it is before I blend it, this salsa is usually made with cilantro, but I'm going to use epazote instead of cilantro because that's what she uses in her recipe. So I have everything in here. I'm just gonna add enough water to cover and then just bring it to simmer. I'll be right back. So I'm just gonna come over here. Okay, I'm gonna put it over here on this back burner. So I'm not gonna add any salt or anything yet. I'm gonna add the salt. I'm gonna add the salt later, and I'm gonna cover it just to heat it up a little bit faster.
We have some saludos from Diana Encarnacion. She says hi. Max Barrera says saludos desde Coatepec, Pueblo Mágico del Estado de Veracruz.
Wow, that's awesome. Hola, that's so cool. So that's going to be simmering. I just covered it just to get it boiling a little bit faster. And I'm going to use epazote. That's what she uses in the recipe. That's the only reason why. I usually only use epazote for my beans or in quesadillas. That's what I typically use epazote for. But it's native to Mexico. So it's a very long, it's actually referred to as stinky weed. It has a very pungent smell. It gives amazing flavor to quesadillas and to beans. And this was used medicinally in Mexico for years to treat, upset stomach, and they make it, this is why they put it in beans to avoid bloating. It also was used to treat parasites. So I'm gonna add a few leaves of these. I'm actually just gonna add let's do 3 leaves of these instead of the typical cilantro that you see in this particular type of sauce. And then just gives I said that it has a very pungent smell, and it almost has like a very anisey, scent. It's really distinct. It's a weed, basically. It grows like a weed. But I think it's really, it's just an interesting.
It's a unique flavor. It's a unique scent.
It's hard to describe unless
I say it's gasoline. For me, it's like gasoline.
Oh, really?
Yes, it's like really pungent. I don't know.
It is very pungent for sure. It is. It's very unique. Yeah, I love it though. But yeah, she doesn't include cilantro. She includes this one in this particular sauce. So this is just the squash, also native to Mexico. I'm just gonna dice this and cook it in a little bit of oil with salt. I'm not going to use any pepper because I want all of the punch to come from the chile and from the epazote. So that's where we're going to get all of our flavor. So I'm just going to dice these and then heat up some oil. But while I do this, does anybody have any more questions about the cookbook?
No.
Or anything? No.
Now, we don't have, those are winter squash or summer squash you have there?
This is summer squash. I got this where I got the chicharrones yesterday. They had a bunch of different types of squashes. They had the little round ones, the little tiny round ones that I love. Then they had the regular zucchini, but this is a summer squash. That's what it, no, actually I didn't get them there. I got them somewhere else, but it said summer squash. So lots of recipes for calabacitas. And when I mentioned that she writes this sort of disdainfully, like, oh, the irreverent, European style cookbooks, but then she includes a bunch of them and includes a lot of, indigenous ingredients native to Mexico. But it's interesting that she still knew she had to sell cookbooks. She still knew that her market were a lot of these, snooty Porphyrian ladies who bought pâtés at the market, at the specialty store. So when she has a recipe for pozole, she mentions it as the indigenous. So she even though she's putting everything together, certain dishes like that that have such a long history, pre-Hispanic, history, particularly pozole, it has such a rich history. She puts them in another section. So she still had to sell cookbooks. So even though she's knocking it, she still straddles this fine line, which I find, so fascinating.
Well, she knows her audience. So, a little bit of home cooking, a little bit of European cooking.
Exactly. She knows her audience and she wanted to sell cookbooks. Ultimately, that's the point, right? I'm just going to let this heat up a little bit and then just cook these until this is almost starting to come to a simmer. So as soon as this heats up, I'll put them in there. And what else? Any other questions?
I've got a question for you. I know we're so fortunate here in Los Angeles, we can get anything.
Yeah.
So close to the border. Other folks are in Chicago or parts of town. If we don't have fresh tomatillos, I've seen them in cans. I never cooked with the canned ones because we've been so spoiled here, but can we use the canned ones for the sauce?
Yeah, definitely. Verde is the brand, Herdez. They make a pretty good green salsa. It's funny, I was telling my mom yesterday that I was making this today, and she's like, oh, I made them last week. And she's like, but I'm not going to make this. I'm like, I'm too lazy to make the sauce. And she uses the Herdez. So they make a pretty good brand.
So because I know they come in the tomatillos come in a water. So if I bought the can and I'm going to make this recipe, would I use the same water in the can, or would I scoop out the tomatoes and put them into and start all over with that? With fresh water versus cooking it in the can, the water that's in the can.
I would definitely start with fresh water. I've actually never seen them in the can, the tomatillos and stuff in the can. I was referring to the actual salsa, to the green salsa that always comes already prepared. Yeah. So I've never actually seen. I just added. I'm just going to saute them a little bit and then add some salt to them. Just let them get a little bit soft. But yeah, if you buy them in a can already whole, just dump the sauce and start fresh. Yeah, actually what you would do are they already cooked when they're in that?
They're great. I've never cooked them. I just seen them and I was just like, oh no, they always get the fresh stuff. So I'm just wondering for those folks like in Chicago, someplace else who don't have access to what to do with if they find a can. Should they cook with the liquids or just scoop them out and start fresh with fresh water?
If they're already soft, I would just remove the liquid and just put them in the blender as is, and then maybe add a little bit of fresh water if you need to. But I wouldn't cook with the water that's in there. It's like when you buy like a can of chickpeas. I always rinse out the water, so I think about it in the same way. So I'm just gonna saute. I'm gonna start adding a little bit of water to this. But yeah, you're right. We are very lucky in Southern California that we have access to so many so many fresh ingredients, and not just Mexican, but really, anything, right? We can really have access to everything. But at the same time, so many things are canned, and if you live in a place where it's freezing cold or you can't find anything, there are always substitutions. And this is how we start, new recipes are invented, right? When you can't find this, so you substitute with that. So it creates a whole other cuisine, really. So this is boiling. So I'm just gonna let that go a little while, just until the tomatoes are really just gray. And in the meantime, I'm just gonna keep these going. Once that's ready, I'm gonna add the green sauce to my calabacitas and just bring that to a simmer. And then I'm gonna add the pork skins, and that they're just gonna turn really soft pretty quickly. Not low fat, not for, it's basically pork.
No, but I was looking at it, it's pretty keto friendly.
It is.
It's totally
Yeah,
keto
totally.
friendly.
Yeah, it's totally keto friendly. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. It's all natural, really. It's everything. It's everything that you need. So okay, so these guys are starting to, they're not quite ready yet. I love this idea in this particular cookbook and a lot of cookbooks of this time period, where it's not only, food, desserts, all of that, food recipes, but there's always the medicinal aspect of it. And we don't see that in cookbooks today at all. Like, we don't see the recipes para el tocador. Like, when you put your makeup on, okay, what do you put on your face? What perfume do you have? They have a whole, there's a whole section of rose water, cream, like a lotion, and it's all using natural ingredients. So it's all of the beauty aspects and all of the medicinal aspects, and then also cleanliness, like good toothpaste, and so you don't see that. I kind of wish that their cookbooks did that.
Yeah, but sometimes it's like, family stories. Like, I remember, like, my grandfather's sisters, they would use, after they made fresh orange juice, they would keep the oranges themselves and keep them in water overnight. And the next morning they would wash their faces with the orange water. And they said that's why they had such beautiful skin, because the citrus, so I think a lot of that's kind of passed down, little simple, like, beauty tricks, beauty aids, that again, we don't see that in these, cookbooks or in these collections of what to do.
Yeah, we need to bring that back, right? Just like,
I got to give it a try. I got to give it a try about the oranges.
The orange face. Have you ever tried it?
No, I think I'm going to try. I'm going to try to do that. So just like fresh, just the cascos, what's left over of the oranges, and leave them. And then that was the story, that they would wash their faces in the morning, and that's why they had such great skin.
That's great.
So we'll see.
So I'm going to go ahead and put these. So let's see. I'm just going to bring them over. I'm going to bring my camera over here so you can kind of see what they look like. They just turned a kind of a grayish green color, as opposed to the bright green when I first started. So you can see how they're kind of grayish. They're no longer kind of bright, and the onion is pretty soft. So I'm going to go ahead and put all of this in the blender. So this one is, they're kind of, some of them are smaller and they burst open. So I'm just going to put all of this in a blender. The chile, the tomato, the garlic, and the onion. And then I'm just going to add a little bit of the cooking liquid, maybe just about like a quarter cup of the cooking liquid. Just to, oh, that chile is spicy. I could almost smelled it and it went all the way into my mouth. So I'm just adding all of this to the blender. And let me flip this over, and I'm going to add a little bit of the water. So let me just, you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to stick this in here. Just about a quarter cup or less. Yeah, just a little bit. And I'm going to be pretty generous with the salt at this point. Maybe start with like about a teaspoon of salt. And I'm going to blend this. I'll be right back. I forgot my epazote. I'm going to put this in there. Okay, so I'm just gonna add this sauce to my zucchini and then just bring that to a simmer. So it already looks really pretty. Let me just flip this over so that you can see it. It's really bright green, and I'm just gonna taste it for seasoning. But how pretty is that? So I'm just gonna let that simmer a little bit. Oh, that's really spicy.
Is the zucchini still a little crunchy? What's the texture for our folks at home?
The zucchini is still a little bit crunchy, not too much, but it'll soften because this is gonna simmer for a little longer. I'm gonna let it reduce just for a little bit, and it'll cook longer. So I just cooked it until it was just starting to soften because I don't want it. You know, zucchini is so delicate and it could get really soft and kind of lose its, just kind of lose itself. So I want to have just still a little bit of bite to it, but it'll continue to cook in the salsa here. So I'm just gonna. But how beautiful is that? And I love the yellow with the green. And I'm just gonna go ahead and start adding. Let me taste it again. I just added a little bit more salt. It's so good. Now I'm just gonna add the chicharrones. So this recipe is exactly from the cookbook, except for the ribs. That's the only thing that's missing, but that takes a little bit longer. So these will start to soften pretty quickly. Does anybody eat chicharrones at home?
I do. I do for sure.
They're so delicious. I haven't eaten them in so long. So, okay. So they're already starting to soften. And I'm gonna make a little taquito with this. Just add a little bit more. And then just soften. Any questions about the recipe or any other questions about the book or just cookbooks in general? Keep that going a little bit longer. Sometimes they're like super soggy. Sometimes they're still a little bit crunchy. I want a little bit of them a little bit in between. So I'm just gonna keep that going a little longer. And then what I'm gonna do while that continues to cook, I'm just gonna heat up a corn tortilla. So if anybody has any questions.
Oh, is there a vegetarian substitute for the chicharrones?
Oh, well, you can definitely get the ones that come in they make them out of flour. So that could be, that would definitely be, it doesn't have the same flavor, but it has the same texture, the flour ones.
And there's another question, Diana Encarnacion. Can you make the salsa and store it if you do not use it all? And how long can it be stored?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Gosh, how long can it be stored? A week? What do you think, Jimenez?
I think a week, yeah.
Yeah, definitely a week.
Keep it in the fridge and tighten the container. You should be good for a week, and then it turns sour, I feel.
Yeah, it does. But definitely let it cool, bring it to room temperature, and then heat it up.
Then Diana Carnacion is also asking, did you buy or did you make your own chicharrones?
Oh, I didn't make my own. I've never made my own. I bought them.
That's you got to be like a specialist. First of all, you got to get the product, get the pig skin, and you got to have a big vat of fat
to be able to cook it. And then where do you get the pig skin? I wouldn't even know. I mean, I guess you go to a butcher. It's not something that they just. I mean, they have the cueritos, right? I guess that's the same thing.
I don't know, but that's a specialty. And if you go down to the Piñata district, there's a gentleman that does the big chicharrones, the big huge guys there. But that's a specialty. That's an art in itself to make a homemade chicharrones.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Definitely. That's hardcore for sure.
That's legit. That's home cooking.
That's home cooking. I wish
that is home cooking.
Yes, but no. Next time.
Next time we'll go to chicharron contest. Yes, we'll get the big chicharron, get all your stuff. Arturo Rodriguez from Denver Snowstorm is checking in. Dixon Steele, what is the name of the cookbook author? The cookbook and the author again, one more time.
Okay, I'm gonna write it down. Vicenta Torres de Rubio, and it's called Cocina Michoacana. Oops, did I write that? Yes, there it is.
Okay, and then let's see. Vicenta Torres de Rubio, Cocina Michoacana. Oh, there you wrote it. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And then we have Maria Lugo. She says hello from Palmdale. And Cesar Garcia, she's hustling. Nice work.
Oh, excellent. Yes. Perfect. So I'm just going to heat up a tortilla and make myself a little taquito before we say goodbye. So I'm going to heat it up. The way I do at home is just directly on the flame. This is the way that I just heat it up. Unless I'm making, you know, quesadillas or something, I just heat up my tortillas directly on them. Do you do this as well, Everlardo and Jimena, just directly on the?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely on the stove.
Yeah. So just to get a little bit of color on there, a little bit of
the color, a little texture.
Little color and texture, exactly.
If you haven't burned your fingers on a tortilla yet, you're not a true Mexican. But hey, I'm just saying.
That's very true. That's very true. Yeah.
My kids used to use tongs. I said, get rid of those fingers.
You need to stick your fingers in there. Yes, keep your fingers. Oh, let's see. Says somebody. Oh yeah. I just hey Brady. I just put it on top of your comment. Vicenta Torres de Rubio, and the book is called Cocina Michoacana. Oh, Facebook. Yeah, and somebody's asking to put it on Facebook Live as well.
I'll do that right now.
Yeah, and the link as well. So yeah, it's a really and it's also I think it's worldcat.org. WorldCat. They tell you what libraries it's available. So you know what libraries actually have them. They're not open yet, but it is available around the country for sure. So this is done. I'm just gonna put them in my little tortilla. You can also sprinkle a little cheese on there, a little bit of, sometimes with a little avocado, but I'm just gonna leave it just like this. So there's my little tortilla. Very old school, very rancho. It's perfect for a rainy day.
Take a bite.
I'm going to. Wait, it's really hot, but I'm very excited. I can't do it. It's too hot right now. But I'm going to. It's just like so.
Oh my God, I could see the steam coming off of it. It's on fire.
I'll leave it open for a little while before I
But yet again, thank you for sharing your knowledge, your history. I want to go, you know, I collect books all the time, but I didn't realize it was $3,000. So maybe La Plaza could we could buy one or we could split one. But again, thank you for sharing your knowledge. That looks absolutely delicious. And as always, such a pleasure. And a suggestion, maybe next time we do this, Maite, we do it in Spanish.
I think we should. Yeah, I would love that.
Yeah, great idea. Great suggestion.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah.
Adelante, take it away.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maite. Thank you so much, Jimena. Yes, we have put the link there. It's a very long one. It's a Google books.google.com.books and a whole bunch of numbers and symbols. So you can check it out on the chat there. Copy it now before it goes away. On Facebook as well, we posted it there. Let's see, Gloria Parker, gracias. Love you, Maite. Says Gloria. Pamela Cooley, thank you for a wonderful presentation. Braden Coleman, amazing. XO. And D. Razuk, great presentation and recipe. And I totally agree. It looked pretty simple. I've been buying my chicharrones from Vallarta. They come in a nice size bag like that. And somebody was saying that they're a little bit too hard, but this makes them softer. This makes them soft, yeah. and you're able to enjoy them in your tacos or just have them in a bowl. And oh, okay. So Veronica Manzano, provecho. So thank you so much, everybody that tuned in today to En Casa con la Plaza Cocina. Thanks to our sponsor, Kaiser Permanente and PepsiCo. Next week on our program, we have sopes de chorizo and Gabi Rosé. Somebody asked about en español. Sí, la sesión que viene la semana que viene, el lunes, el 22 de marzo, va a ser en español con la chef Gabriela Melchum de Hacienda Guadalupe a las 3 de la tarde el lunes que viene. So 3 o'clock next Monday, we have sopes de chorizo and Gabi Rosé. The Gabi Rosé is an actual rosé wine direct from Chef Gabriela's Hacienda Guadalupe. So if you go to our website at lapca.org or to our Facebook page, the events page, you could click on, you could buy a bottle of the wine, and it could be either, you could pick it up from our good friend Gil in downtown LA, or he will ship it to you so you could have your sopes and have a little rosé on the side to enjoy it with. All right, well, thank you so much. If you didn't catch the entire presentation, we have, we're recording it. We'll be placing it on our YouTube page at La Plaza LA, also on our website, lapca.org. You could catch all our programs coming up this week. We have, if you like boleros, we have Tres Souls this Wednesday at 7 o'clock, singing the best of the romantic music, just 7 o'clock on Wednesday. And then on Friday, March 19th, the return of Dan Guerrero and his happy hour with the great singer Perla Batalla. So that's it for today, excuse me. Thank you again, Maite. Thank you, Jimena. And we'll see you all soon.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Gracias.
Bye.